Good afternoon. And this afternoon we have a treat. Achim just made it back. He ran back to his office because he realized that he had the wrong presentation. But he's found the right presentation, and we now realize it's all too human. So there's really no need to introduce Achim. We all know him, and I understand many of us love him. So yes, many of us love him, don't we? Oh, women. Yeah. Bob says it's only the women who are answering. So I'm sure Bob loves Achim. Ilwa disagrees.
No, I didn't say anything.
Yeah. But here we are, and I've always known and seen Achim make presentations, but we have great expectations for this presentation. We've always thought that Achim is not only a quintessential scientist, he's also a big thinker. And big thinking is what we need to get us into the future and to prepare us for the challenges ahead. And indeed, he set a gold standard that we all aspire to. So, without any further introduction, Achim Dobermann.
Okay, I had a few technical challenges which indicate that I wasn't thinking big enough. So this presentation is small thinking, more fun. So it's of a different kind, and that's probably why the crowd is probably also the biggest ever that showed up in my talk here. Thank you. What I thought I'd do is, over the last 6 years as the DDGR, I filled up those 14 notebooks here. You've seen me scribbling in them, you may have wondered what's in those. And it's a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot about the future. So I leaf through those things, reflecting a little bit back on some of the things that really changed over the years. Maybe a few lessons we can learn. We have a couple of things only which I thought went pretty bad or could be done better. And I'll say a few words at the end of what remains to be done. So my first life in Erie started in 1992. And it's very much like most of your experience. You take your young family to a foreign, remote land. You try to tell them everything is great and fine and easy, and hope that they somehow get used to it and are happy while you're busy doing your work. And so we had a great time. Our kids grew up in this country. I think they cherish it still. For myself, the biggest challenge was that I had to create a research group, and nobody told me how to do that. So I had to hire people and develop a research program, and also, in a way, establish yourself and even compete with famous people in Erie who were already around and had created big kingdoms for 20 years or more, some probably even 30 years. So this is my team at the end of about 1999, and you can see lots of energetic young people, and it's interesting to learn what happened to all of them. Mira Pampolino, at that time already had gone off to Japan to do a PhD, and she's now back at Erie, but working as a scientist for the International Plant Nutrition Institute. Ludwig is still at CSD as secretary. Angel, Jerome, Wency are still all around, also now in different research groups. Evelyn works at UPLB. Arlene and Greg followed me later to Nebraska to do a PhD. Arlene is a research scientist at UC Davis now, and Greg, after having an interesting career in the oil palm industry, has just joined us again as a consultant in the Golden Rice Project. And then there's Christian Witt, who is now Senior Program Officer in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So for the young scientists at Erie, this is the expectation, what you need to do in terms of developing is I had no clue what to do. I was hired initially as a program leader, and then a year later became DDGR, but then you ask yourself the question, when you make the step from being a scientist then to becoming a science leader, what do you actually do? What do you do as a program leader or as a DDG? What's the expectation? Where do you start? And the truth is that there's no recipe to this, and there's also nobody who's going to tell you what to do, because everybody else is busy, and you have to somehow figure it out. Now, I can reveal at this point that until now I have successfully avoided attending any serious leadership or management training course. And for various reasons, I've attended the more specific ones on technical issues, but I've never had any formal training in how to become a leader or something, whatever. So what I did do in 2007 is I read 2 books, small books. And I thought that was just enough for me, because the one book over here, Organizing Genius, is all about how do you make creative individuals work together in a team or on some bigger thing that requires creative collaboration. And there's a lot of concrete examples for this in there, and I thought that all made a lot of sense to me. Some of those things one can probably apply here. The other book is by Peter Drucker, the doyen of the business management science, if you wish. And that's all about how to be effective in what you do, how to manage your time, how to make decisions, how to communicate, all of these things. So I felt that if you make an effort to read those 2 books and absorb a few things of them, and maybe attend a few formal training opportunities, you should be all doing fine leading your research groups or your programs or whatever. Now, when I applied to become DDGR, I applied all of the stuff that I read in these 2 books to create a large set of slides of what I was going to do. So I went back to those slides a few days ago thinking, Jesus, probably didn't achieve half of that. But it was actually quite interesting. So these are unedited slides, this one in particular. I said I'm going to do 3 main things, or at least contribute to them. One is we want to have scientists and support staff who are motivated by being in the right place, who have rewarding career opportunities, who can therefore concentrate on big challenges without distractions. That was my first goal. My second goal was we need to have more powerful, product-oriented research groups with more resources and enough space to explore both products, but also exploring things, discovering things more powerful than we were. And the third thing, I said that time we must have therefore a dedicated management team and effective management processes and structures that encourage and enable excellence in science and manufacturing. And I looked at these again this morning and think, yeah, I've done pretty well, most of those. It's never perfect. It's never a complete process that you can say, well, we've achieved it, we can settle down and go to sleep now. No. But we've come a long way, and in the last 6 years, distilled this usually in my daily approach into those 4 questions that I kept bothering most of you with on a regular basis. What needs to be done? How are we going to do it? How much does it cost? And where are we going to find the money? So for scientists, the most important thing to be able to answer is the first question. If you don't know what the priority is and what needs to be done and why, you can't make a case for it. All the other questions become irrelevant. And I think it is also important to look at the practicalities. When you talk about how we're going to do it, the very important question is always who is going to do it. And what it costs means that scientists often have unrealistic expectations, wanting to do too many things at the same time with too little money available. And the last question is really then for people like me and Bob and others to answer. But we have to have first before try. And it worked for me pretty well. Didn't questions to developing a $100 million a year risk project, or making a small management decision at an institution level, even on a daily basis. These work for me, maybe work for some of you too. Now, on Monday, this is what I did. I dumped a mountain of 18,096 electronic files on Matthew. And of course, it's going to take him a while to dig through that. But we've been making progress to address a few of the major folders in them. But this is essentially my track record as DDGR, 6 years. Everything that I've done is more or less there. Now, I'm not a keeper. I probably processed 5 times as many files and thrown away all the other ones that were rubbish. But that's what's left. And I think when you look at this then from a distance, you think, wow, it's not bad, you know, quite a bit of stuff. And Matthew, of course, has now the challenge to dig through this and draw his own conclusions. I think what he's going to discover is that as he is climbing up that mountain, he will open up new mountains to climb. Because there are many areas that we have really just touched the surface on in terms of what we should be doing, what we have been able to do. But I have a very great confidence that Matthew will go into that direction and will also bring in many new ideas and approaches that will enable us to do things much better than I have been able to accomplish. Now, it's very important to remember where we were in 2005-06. So many of you went around in those days because since then we've hired something like 500 new staff. And at that time, Erie was at the end of, I would say, a long period of decline in funding, possibly also in staff morale, the ability to really have a greater impact. We had only about 900 staff in terms of IRS, only about 2/3 of the less than what we have at present. Only about 15 postdocs. We have now more than 45, 800, a bit more than 800 NRS. Budget was only 30 million. We had lots of small and medium-sized projects from many different donors, mostly of the traditional kind. There was no cost recovery built into those, so we subsidized those heavily. Our partnerships were still primarily with the National Agricultural Research Systems and advanced research institutions. Didn't have much strategic collaboration with Africa Rise or SEAT. We had very little interaction with the private sector at that time. And we had, I would say, antiquated business and HR policies and practices. And some of you, of course, will say we still have those, but we've come a long way. And we had an aging infrastructure. So I think when Bob joined as DG, it became clear that there needed to be a major transformation process. And I think these were some of the major targets. We wanted to, first of all, rebuild strength. Because we felt that Erie was capable of doing a lot more if it was using the right approach. And then it was addressing all of these other things. And that also then led to increasing thinking that we must have more product-oriented R&D pipelines, maintain high science standards. We need new and more strategic partnerships into the private sector that require that we had to gear up our whole thinking and approaches for IP management. As an institute as a whole, there was an urgent need to take a more business approach to how we manage many daily operations, HR policies, management, communication, and of course infrastructure needed to address. So this is quite a shopping list. When you look at that, it's a daunting challenge actually. How you can turn around an institution and try to really live up to its full potential. It started with a new strategic plan in 2006, which laid out 5 major goals, and already in many ways had many of the pieces in it that we then later built on, and I think added on in many ways, also improved on. But I think there are some interesting milestones then in this process that I experienced myself when I joined in January 2007. And I just wanted to share because some of these things came on us rather unpredicted, but they were opportunities that just grabbed by the horns, and really they turned into major opportunities for us. Now I started my process of reacquainting myself with theory by spending 60 hours listening to 28 scientists over a couple of weeks. Because I was program leader of program 2, which was the largest program. It represented something more than a third of Erie's work. It was at that time the intensive systems program, so it had anything from genomics to post-harvest and everything in there. So this sample was actually a good cross-cutting sample for most of Erie. And when I talked to the scientists, what I realized is that there were many sleeping ideas, if you wish. So we had lots of creative, intellectual potential which wasn't really utilized. And people were frustrated about this, they were also frustrated about bureaucracy, senior management not quite getting it, or things like that. And I also asked the scientists to assess themselves how they were spending their time, and this is the result of that. And it becomes obvious that there was a lot of variability. By and large, IRS and some IRF at that time were probably not spending enough time on research themselves. They were busy with all kind of other managerial things. But what caught my eye also were some of the outliers. And here is one. There was one scientist who told me that, no, I really don't care about all this nonsense. I'm spending 80% of my time in the field because that's what the breeder is supposed to do. That's farming sheep. He's sitting there. I can reveal that now. I will not make the audio tapes of those interviews public because I promised that to the scientists. So he was one of the first ones I met on January 17th, 2007. And we had a very long conversation. I was asking about his hybrid program, and he was basically asking, so, why aren't we moving faster? Why aren't we creating better hybrids? And he said, well, no money, no people, no intellectual, no IP policy, management doesn't support me that way. Something, he said many more things, and that was basically the gist of it. And I asked him, do you know how the ideal hybrid would look like if you could do it? He drew it on a sheet of paper, but that's it, he said. And I said, okay, there's only two choices. One is we close down your program because you were running out of money. The last grant from ADB finished 2 years ago. Or we turn it completely around and establish it as a public-private partnership. And that's how, on this day, essentially, the idea of the Hybridized Development Consortium was born. And it took them another year to get it going. And initially with 38 members in 2008, but now we have 68, more than half of private companies, and you can see the tremendous impact it has had in the number of young person samples we were sharing at that time, and nowadays it's something like, what, 15, 16, 17 times more already. It's still growing. So I think that's, for me, has been one of the most enjoyable experiences, and also made me think about many things differently than I had thought before, because I had spent all my time in the public sector. I had very limited exposure to private companies and IP and all this business. But this forced us to do things, and it also then led to a wider range of models for partnership with the private sector that most of you now know, one way or another, are in operation. The point I want to make there is that a lot more needs to be done, a lot more is possible. We're still not even scratching the surface of what we should be doing in this area. Not primarily because we want to get rich and pocket more money into our pockets, but because it would enable Erie to have much bigger impact. So, but that's us in July 2007, when the Gates Foundation, at that time, they were just sort of gearing up their agricultural program, and so they wanted to educate themselves and to organize the right meetings. So some of us went to Seattle, and we spent 2 days there presenting what we thought needs to be done on rice, together with other colleagues who were some from Africa or Alaska or something too. That meeting was the direct trigger for our first 4 major Gates grants. That one meeting. We actually stayed, some of us, an extra day. Dave McGill and myself included, we stayed an extra day right away to develop the concept for Strasser, right there. And within the next 2 years, all of those 4 big Gates grants, which we still have, were developed and funded, and of course after that, we had more. This was a game changer for Erie. Big game changer, because we had to deal with much bigger, much more demanding donor that also forced us to rethink the way we were doing our work. The Gates Foundation did not accept some of the things that we would say. Said, well, it's going to take us 8 years to do this. No, that they would do it in 3 years. And so there was a lot of pressure coming that way, but also very strong engagement from them in trying to help us in that process. And I think if we didn't have that trigger in 2007, and we wouldn't have these 4 projects and all of the others, we would still be a very different organization today, honestly speaking. Now, then another thing came on us. Now, Bob and others and Erie started making noise in 2007, probably even 2006 already, trying to remind the world that there might be a rice crisis looming, because prices had been creeping up already for a few years and the stocks were being drawing down. Nobody would listen. They were basically all saying, well, it's just Erie propaganda. And then all of a sudden in April 2008, it hit us like a hammer. And the next thing that happened is we were inundated by the world media and had our hands full just dealing with that. We were on all of the major news channels for months, sometimes several times. And the question that we always got is, what can be done about this crisis? And what will Erie do? This happened essentially right after I became DDGR. I started on April 1st, 2008. So I was hoping to have a quiet period to get myself acquainted with the job. It didn't happen. So that's right away dumped at us. And we had cartoons in newspapers like this one in Singapore Straits Times in Erie, trying to roll up the world going down, basically. Pretty impressive. It gave us a lot of attention from media and also donors, but of course they wanted to see action. So we then got together as an institutional effort. I would call it a rapid response planning exercise, because we produced a document called Responding to the Rice Crisis, an action plan of 9 points, and we produced this in less than 3 weeks. What we actually did in this document, bottom-up exercise in terms of what are the most feasible options in terms of doing something quickly. You can see those up here, all the way down to things that would take longer time and would require a longer-term investment. We even specified in that document the resources that Erie would need. We estimated at that time Erie as such, just for itself, to be able to contribute to this, would need between $60 and $65 million. Now we are at present at closer to $100 million revenue, but if you take away all the money that we pass through, that passes through Erie to partners and Africa Rice and everything else, we're actually not far off that number in terms of the money that's just being used for supporting research here at Erie and a few countries over. So, but this had a direct impact in many ways. So it led right away to a major grant from ADB, that was 10 million, I think, something like that. It was good. But it also, I think, influenced a number of other things. It got into the ASEAN documents for support, and may have also triggered more interest in rice among many donors and governments. And I would say it was in many ways the precursor of what then ended up as CRISP. Now, while we were trying to save the world, the CGRI, as usual, was busy with trying to deal with itself. And Bob, in his year-end seminar in December 2008, tried to explain this theory stuff, what was going on, and the CGR change process had just started around middle of 2008, more or less. So he presented that slide here, trying to explain what the new structure could look like. You know it, of course, by heart now. Some of those elements, I think, were depicted here in a very simplified manner. The reality looks quite different. But what I found more interesting, and these are again unedited slides stolen from Bob, which he doesn't know. He also stated this. Oddly enough, the main feature is the creation of mega programs, which are not shown in this diagram. And he thought they would be in that range. Other than that, everything is totally unclear, but he also thought we're going to fight like hell over those things. So, and then he went one step further, suggesting that he, I, and Mike would have a very busy year, and probably a very unpleasant year. And also that the whole thing wasn't really so through that, and therefore also those people who actually were triggering and pushing all that didn't suffer the consequences of what we had. So in terms of projections, I think Bob is doing much better than many economists projecting the future. I think he got one thing wrong, and it wasn't just one very unpleasant year, it was at least two. But it was great fun. And now one thing that we had at our advantage, I think, compared to many others, is that we said right away, Jesus, we're not going to wait for that mess to come upon us. We will go ahead and create our own mega program. Now we had started that process already quite a bit earlier with the ERI Africa Rice alignment process that had started in 2007. There wasn't much follow-up because there was leadership changes at both ends then. But then in September, I would call that another milestone in ERI's history, a not so well-known one. In September 2008, Joe Arkising was along for the first time in Africa, made a trip with some colleagues from Africa Rice, and even had some people from BRAC and Bangladesh with us. A tour of Eastern Africa to spend a week together that then led actually to the formulation of the joint Eastern Southern Africa Rice program of ERI and Africa Rice. Now here we're having a good time, we're standing at the source of the Nile, and so it's a beautiful place to go to, but we were actually working. And we built a relationship at that point that by the time the annual general meeting came in Maputo of the CJR in December, we were able to present a joint strategy to the donors. And that was a surprise to many of them. We even had a joint exhibit booth here in Africa Rice. That was for the first time. We were fighting each other before, and it was unheard that two CG centers could possibly have a joint booth or do it together to a meeting of donors and say we want to do this together. So that was the starting point of GRISP. On the way back from Maputo, I think Bob and I had a conversation in I think it was in the Johannesburg airport, where we sat down and had a stopover time, and we scribbled on a sheet